All right, it's time for that moment when pretentiousness and me. Yeah, so I did contrarianism in me. I'm now doing pretentiousness in me. I'm probably going to do more. I looked up pretentious on Google. This is from the Medium, the news source. I already forgot the guy who wrote the article, and I'm not sure exactly, but I just know this is in that article. So if you just look up pretentious on Google Images, it's like in the first couple sources, and it's from Medium. Look at that, I got an actual source down. Although I did have to re-record this bit, so I did forget the guy's name who wrote the article. Anyway, which doesn't mean that's where the image is from. I'll apologize for any potential background noise, but um, normally it doesn't seem to be picking up much, so I'm not too worried. Either way, um, yeah, the big thing that I wanted to do, because I've been doing a lot of music review stuff, I'm wanting to do an episode where I'm not really having to listen to anything, not really having to look at anything, although this is a nice image. I did want to talk about this because I do think it's pretty interesting to talk about, especially after my last couple of abandoned pools reviews and a lot of stuff from like, Let God's uh, Sort Him Out and like Kendrick Lamar. And I don't know. I feel like the more I've been seeing, the more I feel weird with this kind of stuff. And I've talked about contrarianism. And I think this is going to have a lot of overlap. So hopefully this isn't too much. But then again, I've had times where I've had the same topic in multiple episodes, and I also don't care. Like, this is my show. I do what I want. But I do want to talk about more than just me and what I feel with contrarianism and how that interfaces with how I operate, right? Because I think I think re-listening to my thoughts or having said a lot of the things, I feel like I do have a lot of internalized contrarianism. I think a lot of people do. It is really hard to separate, right? Especially because like I do have a lot of figures that I do listen to that do care about originality and things, but I also do, but that doesn't mean that it is the most important thing. I also have a very different opinion that, while it is important to give credit to artists that kind of start something, I've talked about Salem King Knight, you know, even the Beatles. Although the Beatles, I mean, I need more time with that discography. Like, I tend to appreciate more of the artists that do better in a craft, not necessarily that they're original for it. However, a lot of times I find that there are artists that both do something unoriginal and uninteresting, the most obvious prominent example being Welcome to the Madhouse, which I have not yet done a re-review of. I'm not sure I can be convinced to, because that album is so bad. That is one of the worst albums in history, in my opinion, especially of a big name artist with a like hit single from, not from the album, just a hit single, right? Or hit song, maybe I should say. I I just am shocked that album exists. And is it pretentious of me to have these opinions, right? Is it that I am viewing things that maybe, and maybe I should check the exact Google definition, because my interpretation, I'm going to say my interpretation first, and then I'm going to look at like an Oxford. But like, my interpretation is that in layman terms, pretentiousness is putting emphasis on things that aren't really that all that important, and slash or um discrediting things for not being at a certain caliber. But I feel like pretentiousness usually is about saying more than what is there. Thinking that the things that you value or the things that you say are of a higher value and are less apparent, maybe, or insightful than they really are. Let's Google check. Yeah, we're gonna have this on for like a minute. Yeah, so the thing I got from Google that I didn't initially read when I was going to the image search was just attempting to impress by affecting greater importance, talent, culture, etc., than is actually possessed, like a pretentious literary device, similar to affected and ostentatious. So at some point this will disappear. Yeah, like I think that and I know I was saying I didn't want to look at anything, but at least that was pretty short. Um, I don't know. Like, I think attempting to, yeah, impress by showing greater importance in something is like I think that makes sense to me. I like it kind of is that something is more than it is, right? Is kind of what I was thinking. And I guess that's what it is. I guess it's more self-inflicting than I was thinking initially, and I was trying to push towards it, but I think yeah, this is more apparent. So, anyway, I think it's really easy to be a pretentious reviewer in music if you're a big music fan, right? I think it's really easy to be like, "Oh, I only oh there it goes. I only like, I like Radiohead and Old Duster and whatever, stuff that makes, that has really good lyricism, that has important things, and I only like all these things, that have high value. And if you don't like these things with high value, you are not an active or important listener." And I feel like that is a very pretentious mindset, and I don't feel like I fit into that well. I definitely care, like, a bit. I'm like one of those people where I'm like, you have to be someone who knows the meaning of like pumped up kicks. You have to like, if you're going to really love a piece of art and you're gonna be like it's your favorite song, you should know it's about. Like, it doesn't mean you have to agree with it, but like, do you really know it? Do you? And I don't know, right? Because like Crystal Castles is an artist I really like, and I've only really paid attention to the lyrics on a lot of like a few tracks that are my absolute favorites. So like Suffocation, whatever. Is it pretentious to really want to care? Maybe. I feel like for some stuff it's just like I think especially for like the widespread pop stuff, obviously Pump Up Kicks, but like Sail, people don't remember the like, maybe I should KMS, like in the song, like I think is really funny, but it's also because it's such a popular song, you would think that would be, well understood and broadly discussed. We had stuff like "It's Cold Outside" getting, flagged, and I think that's completely correct for it to be like, hey, this is unethical. But we were okay with the other stuff. Like, is it just that we're slow on the take or whatever? I'm not sure that I understand. All right, sorry, I was just doing a quick cut. Yeah, I don't know. I do think it is interesting. Um, I do think that a big thing is that I think comes with pretentiousness is this sense of objectivity, which maybe will end up being a whole other episode. But like, I think objectiveness in media and art in general is kind of dysfunctional. I've had a lot of conversations with people about it. Um, and obviously, I I do think it's hard because I don't inherently think that you need to be a creator in the art form to criticize it. I am of that opinion. Now you could say, "Oh, that's because you can't do the things you criticize." And that's kind of true and kind of false. I at the bare minimum do produce music. I am a music producer. I have written things and I do whatever. I also acknowledge that I am not a great artist right now, and that's partially due to my time, my expertise, whatever. But it's also because a lot of times I criticize artists for not being as good as other ones, or making things that pale in comparison to their other work, which is a really big deal. I think that's a thing where it doesn't feel unjustified to be like, hey, you made this really great album, or this like I don't know. Is it unfair of people to hate M. Night Shyamalan's movies because of Sixth Sense existing? I think that's a fair play to be like, hey, you've done good stuff. Why do you keep making things that are generally perceived as poor, critics don't like, whatever? Like M. Night hasn't made something the populace and critics haven't has liked in a long time, and when his name got attached stuff, people got mad. Like, I don't know. And maybe that's not a fair comparison because the populace didn't like him, but like, I don't know. I feel like to a large extent, I, again, I criticize a lot of art and artists because I want them to make stuff that is better, but also I have to acknowledge that I'm a target demo. Not or I'm not the target demo. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. And that I don't always align with everyone else. And I think a very pretentious viewpoint is the my opinion is the one that should be valued. This is what's important and therefore the artist should do that. That's pretentious. Like I would argue in that regard that yeah, someone like Fantano is probably pretty pretentious, right? But like and what is more important because to an artist it might be money, it might be creative, it might just be they want to do it because they want to do it. It could be literally anything. Um and like I know for my art, I do it because I want to do it. I do get enjoyment out of like having friends that enjoy my music and having them be like, I really like this song, I don't like this song. I like getting criticism because it pushes me towards my self improving, right? Which I've found out because, like, I don't know, Voidescent 4 is a billion times better than Voidescent 1. Like, there's a reason where one of those is a 2 for me and one of them's a 9, like, on in terms of my, discography, right? Obviously, I wouldn't give myself anything above a 4 if it was relative to my, to all other artists. I do think like there probably are a couple things I'd be like, hey, Voidescent 4 could be better than a few albums. It's maybe a tier below average, but like that's in the grand scheme of every artist alive, and even then, that's a bit high. I'm gassing it up a bit. Mostly due to experimental, but like still, I think that it is important to recognize that like and you can have your own opinions on it, and I think there are things like it is hard to be like, isn't music objectively bad if it's like really badly produced, like poorly produced, like there's popping everywhere and all these things? Or could you argue that it's intentional? Could you argue that doesn't make it bad? Like, could you argue bad mixing, headache type stuff? Like, I don't know. It's very interesting because it's like, are you going to call it objectively bad because it doesn't work for you and general populace? Is that even fair? Like, I don't know. And I tend to very easily fall in the trap of using objective because I think it's really easy to be like, hey, the song where it has vocals and I can't hear the vocals is objectively badly mixed because I can't hear the vocals. And the artist clearly intended for them to either via an interview or whatever. Even then, is it a fair thing? I don't know. I tend to think art, the meaning of art is in the eye of the beholder. No, like the viewer is what interprets what the art is, and the art means whatever it means to them, right? And I know that can be very, that is like a general thing that a lot of people say, but I think that it can very much so override the artist's original intentions to a point where the artist's intentions only do so much, because pumped up kicks and its meaning to a lot of people is not a school shooting song. Like, it's not a thing where, I don't know, like I feel like it does become really complicated. I do say the meaning of a track and whatever, and I do think I mean it more based on, yeah, that artist intent. So it is hard. I think I do contradict myself on it a lot because I think from a like logical perspective, I think one thing, and from like an world experience, I think, because like I function in subjectivity and comparative stuff, and I generally think that it should be more like, I don't know, it should be obvious, like, what if there are going to be objectively good and bad things, like some generality of it. But I think a lot of it is more subjective than we tend to think. And maybe I say that because my opinions are bad and I like Abandoned Pools albums that sound like Disney core, whatever, and I that maybe is it. but I've had this opinion for a while. And I mean, again, there are a lot of albums I think are generally considered objectively bad, or not great. I was watching a video of someone doing okay albums with okay album covers, and the first thing to show up was The Fall by Gorillaz, and I was sad because yes, that album's not my favorite album, anymore. Both amongst their discography and of all of my albums I've listened to, but like that has changed, but it's still pretty high up there for me. And I do love that cover. I do love that album. I love how raw it is. I love how honestly, I think it has Damon's overall best vocal performance across the entire record. It has some really cool stuff with how the vocals sound, with like the little bits, the more like robotic electronic bits. It's just like a cool garage band album that, as much as I like something like from the Now, right? You have whatchamacallit, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the name of that song. Well, there is a garage band type song in that album. It's like something like, I don't know. It's before Magic City. It's after Idaho, I think. My brain. I'm gonna have to check that. Yeah, I gave up on that. But anyway, we had a pretty good discussion, and yeah, that's about all I wanted to discuss. Um, Pretentious stuff is what it is, and that moment when I don't know, maybe I'll do more of these centralizing on a word. Maybe it is too misc kind of related, but I think it is more media related enough to a point where I'm pretty willing to talk about it.